The turf war in Punjab continues as Captain Amrinder Singh and Punjab Congress chief Navjot Singh Sidhu round off for another battle. There has been little respite from their bantering and bickering, which has often spilled into the public domain. It is being said that Navjot Singh Sidhu is supported by the Gandhi family in New Delhi, much like the divisions in other states. For example, in Rajasthan, we are all aware of Pilot versus Gehlot, with Pilot supposedly being supported by the Gandhis. In Chhattisgarh, similar situation with Baghel versus Dio, with Baghel getting the support of the Gandhis in New Delhi. Observers say that the absence of Ahmed Patel is intensifying these conflicts. He used to be the buffer between disenchanted party members and the senior leadership. However, in his absence, everything seems to land at the Gandhis' table, and so far is leading to even more conflict. So what lies ahead in Punjab? This past week, Captain Amrinder Singh stepped out of the party line, which was to criticize the newly renovated Jallianwala Bagh Memorial, and praised it. So what exactly is the captain trying to say? One of the few mass leaders in the Congress party, let's see what lies ahead for the beleaguered party in the state of Punjab.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Club. Delighted to be back with you, albeit a little late, half an hour, but that's we did announce in advance that we were going to start at 7:30 today, and we'll dive right into it. You already know what we're discussing first, and that is the situation in Punjab. I'm joined by Sunday Club regular and I guess a founding member, Suhel, Seth, as well as Professor Dipankar Sengupta, who's exceedingly popular with you guys, so he's back with us. And let's get to it. Suhel, you know Captain Amrinder personally. How do you think he is responding to this sort of insubordination that Sidhu kind of serves up every other day?
I think he's playing the smart game. Let the Gandhis realize their own follies. A. B. Why should he be the bad guy? Why should he take the blame when Rahul Gandhi is there befittingly to both take the blame and because he's responsible for it? So I genuinely feel that Amrinder is playing the right role and he's following the right strategy. But here's my question, Advaita. What kind of stupid people does the Congress have who snatch defeat from the jaws of victory every time? How irresponsible, puerile, petty, pernicious, and nincompoopish can they be when they themselves engender, to my mind, intestine wars between themselves? What kind of character or strength or lack of character do they have if they like playing these games as if they were puppeteers in politics? What they don't realize is they are slowly getting into what I call the irrelevant domain. From irrelevance, they will be unrelatable. You rightly mentioned Ahmed Patel. It's ironic, you're talking about Ahmed Patel today, the day when his family has finally cleared out of their Mother Teresa Crescent home or whatever the hell it is in Delhi. Mm-hmm. Ahmed Patel was not a buffer. He was also a strategist. Rahul Gandhi thinks he's a strategist. He's not a buffer, but he's more of a, if you replace the word B with B, then you figure out for yourself. So my view very simply is that Amrinder mustn't do anything which will either shift the needle of suspicion or the burden of blame. Let Rahul Gandhi realize the mistakes he's made. Look, I told you this on your program when we discussed Punjab many, many weeks or months ago, that Sidhu is an unguided missile in the sense he's like one of those old days when we had rockets in Diwali time. You remember those rockets that we'd put in a Coca-Cola bottle? Sometimes the rocket would go up, sometimes it would swirl in the bottle, most times it would go right up your, you know what. So this is what's going to happen. Why should Amrinder be responsible? Finally, but it's not about what will happen in Punjab. There's a survey that has come out, which was published or mentioned in the newspapers today. Aam Aadmi Party has shown great strides or is showing great strides in terms of, being a contender. You have people who are both wily, smart, and moneyed in the form of Sukhbir Badal. You are playing a divided house when that's the only house you have. I mean, this is like taking a goddamn JCB and deconstructing the only dwelling you have to prove a point. And the tragedy is there is no point to prove. So I think if Rahul Gandhi thinks he's cutting Amrinder to size, he must recognize that that is a stupid idea. A, B, it won't happen. Amrinder is a military man. He's a Maharaja. So pride is not easily escapable from his DNA.
Professor, what do you think? I mean, can Captain Amrinder go at it alone?
Look, before I come to Captain Amrinder going it alone or not, I mean, apart from what Suhel has said, these intestine wars, if only had been an internal party of the Congress, affair of the Congress, it would have been one thing. However, if you look at the various actors who are assuming odd roles in this intestine war, makes you, are actually sometimes takes dangerous directions. For example, Sidhu got in these advisor, Malvinder Mali. And if you look at the statements that Malvinder Mali made with respect to Jammu and Kashmir, that Kashmir actually is a separate country, etc., you wonder that are these views becoming mainstreamed in the Congress? You look at Amarinder Singh. Of the three major chief ministers they have, there's Amarinder, there is Gehlot Saab, and there is Bhupesh Baghel. Two of them are real good chief ministers in the sense that they do not adopt tyranny's policy with respect to Delhi. So they don't oppose for the sake of opposition. And there are times when Amarinder calls out the central government on national security issues when he thinks it should be called out. For example, on the Kartarpur corridor, though some people may disagree, but on security issues, Amarinder knows exactly where he stands. Now, you are undermining such a person in a state which is strategically located, very important for security purposes, and you are mobilizing such people to basically undermine him. Now, it's true that Malvinder Mali has been asked to resign. He stepped aside. But I am worrying about the Congress. Which direction is the Congress taking itself to fight these intestine wars? And that is worrying, because if these views get mainstreamed in the Congress, we will have different problems later on. But as to whether Captain Amrinder will actually go it alone or not, I think much depends. So far, he's playing the smart game. He's letting his opponents in the Congress look like fools, which is not difficult, given the fact that they have to only reveal what they actually are. So he is letting them tie themselves up in knots. I think the test will come sometime later on when ticket distribution actually starts. By which time I believe that the people that the La Familia has basically set up to undercut him will have made such fools of themselves that they will be unable to do much. But let us face this. This is something that this family has been playing time and time again and has been undercutting itself. They have lost Telangana, they have lost Andhra Pradesh, they have lost a host of states because they tried to cut their leaders who had a mass base. Will we see it in Punjab? I think not, because they know that there is a particular level they cannot go where Amrinder is concerned, who remains a respected man in Punjab. Royal scion of a royal family, he has his own idiosyncrasies, etc., etc. But nonetheless, when it comes to administration, compare him with what you saw in Haryana during the Ram Rahim riots. How easily he was able to control the situation in Punjab as opposed to what happened in Haryana, Khattar took a longer period of time to control all this. So when it comes to administration, there is no doubt that he is a fine administrator. He has his foibles. He has made certain discordant sounds, which I thought was ill-advised. But by and large, he is a sound chief minister who has delivered Punjab for the Congress. And I believe that even if he is not able to deliver Punjab for the Congress this time, it will be a party in waiting. So whether he goes it alone or not, I don't think he will. But so far, I agree with Suhel. He's played a very smart game and he's let Sidhu look like a fool more than anything else. So I think he'll stay in the Congress.
Okay, I'm just going to request our producer to adjust all our speakers' volumes because there is some audio issue. Ridhima, please go ahead and do that. Abhijit, I'm curious to ask you, what is emboldening Sidhu so much? He wasn't quite as contentious and power grabbing when he was with the BJP.
Look, he's always been a bit of a slime, even when he was in the BJP. All right, this is ultimately it's a clash of class and culture. Please understand, Amrinder Singh comes from one of the oldest royal families of India. This is a man with breeding, with class, with culture, more than all the current so-called Gandhis. They are not Gandhis; they are Minos all put together. Okay. This, Amrinder Singh is a real Maharaja. These are Parvenu pretenders pretending to be a Maharani and a Yuvraj of God knows where from God knows what. Okay. So even ascribing them to the petty nobility of the Savoy family of Italy, you can see why the Italians got rid of the Savoy family. Right? Nobody wanted that track to be the king and queen of Italy. So this is what happens when you get this Gandhi name is just an addition. They've been brought up by the mother, highly, unsure of themselves, perpetually in fear. They need to play these petty power games in order to get some sense of control because they have no real control over anything. So what you're seeing is an old, seasoned, classy man being attacked by hyenas and the deputy hyenas. All right. And this is where it's ended up. Rahul Gandhi will tolerate no other center of power to him. And this is a classic case of resource competition. In anthropology and sociology, what you learn is the worse resource competition gets, the worse, the cannibalism and the internal competition gets. So they've lost so much. It's now a desperate scramble to preserve what you have. And Rahul will not tolerate anybody who can outshine him anywhere. Not in Kerala, not in Telangana. Remember how they screwed over Jagan, and where is Jagan now? Where is the Congress in Andhra today? They're screwing over Bhupesh Baghel as we speak, right? And Navjot Sidhu was one of those, free radical agents, tasteless, classless, no upbringing, no nothing, who fit in perfectly into another bunch of, it's Parvenu meets Parvenu to take down the Maharaja. It's classic. It's a class struggle. It's a struggle of an inferiority complex versus a known achiever. Look, Captain may lose every alternate election, but then he wins every alternate election. Rahul Gandhi does not win alternate elections. Rahul Gandhi wins nothing. He lays duck's eggs wherever he goes. It's just quack, 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 and duck's eggs. That's it. So, I mean, this was just bound to happen. It's a mix of inferiority complex, insecurity, class issues, because he will have a whole bunch of courtiers, sorry to use the word, but sucking up to him. But when it comes to real class, Captain is never going to suck up to him. He's going to treat him for the Parvenu that he is. So that's what it is.
But it seems awfully self-destructive, doesn't it, Suhel? At this point where the Congress is trying to revive itself to get caught up in these interceding battles over this, over a chief minister who is powerful, who is popular, who's won you the election, who is in his 80s. So this is probably going to be one of the last elections he's going to fight. Why are they doing this?
There's an old belief that when you're weak, you're insecure and cowardly, you always bully. But a bully is essentially a coward. That's who or what a bully is. Number two, they are trying to exert themselves, hoping that they can remove themselves from what I call the trenches of irrelevance. To tell them, ki bhai hum bhi hain, hamari baat sunega koi. Sidhu is intellectually innocent. He is unarguably one of the dimmest human beings you will ever meet. Friend of mine, but that doesn't prevent me from saying that. Why is he dumb? As Abhijit rightly said, in addition to being dumb, he's also extremely disloyal. But Rahul Gandhi doesn't realize that, because Rahul Gandhi does not have the intelligence to separate the wheat from the chaff. So today it's the blind leading the blind, the idiots are guiding the idiots, and Amrinder Singh is watching the fun. What has he got to lose? He has maintained his stature, his respect, and his position. He has not played into the hands of what I would call populism or Gandhi cronyism, nothing. So let these guys do what the hell they want to do. But ultimately, Advaita, it's not about the Gandhis alone. I keep saying this repeatedly. It's not, as Mark Antony, when he asked Brutus, why did you stab Caesar in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar? Brutus said, it's not that I loved Caesar less, but I loved Rome more. So it's not that we love the Gandhis less, but we love democracy more. For a democracy, you need an opposition. The problem is this man, Rahul Gandhi, and his family are now becoming roadblocks even in the formation of a united opposition. So not only is he causing harm to the party, he's causing harm to the nation. And until and unless we recognize that as a serious academic issue, we will then be punching way below our weight. We have to realize today that Rahul Gandhi as a politician is doing great disservice to the continuance of democracy in India. Because if you don't have an opposition and you put one obstacle in allowing for a united opposition, you are then playing into the hands of the ruling party. And then what business do you have to question the ruling party? Also, please remember, democracies are not run on Twitter, on Facebook, or on Instagram. He is running politics on Twitter because the 17 people or the 5 people to quote Abhijit to suck up to him are also on Twitter. So they will call him, "Arey boss, great message, lovely, you look very funny." The point is, Sidhu and he are made for each other. One court jester has found the other. This level of companionship you can have when you stage the comedy circus, not when you run the Congress party.
On that note,
how eloquent was that?
That was very
just
eloquent.
Add to that, it's no longer the Congress party. It's become the Punch and Judy show.
Who's Punch, who's Judy? Since you do
That
these...
you figure out. It's,
oh dear.
You know, the old Latin saying, de gustibus non disputandum est. There's no disputing preferences. So you choose.
But how eloquent was that summation, Advaita?
Very eloquent. So Suhel, also you need to run in about 20 minutes. So I know you're trying to run.
Are you mad? Not 20 minutes. I'm running in 5 minutes. My dinner is at 8 o'clock.
Yes. Okay. But thank you. Someone said nice earrings. I'm assuming they're talking to me, but on this show you can never tell. But moving on to our next producer, please load our video. नमस्कार और आपका स्वागत है खबरों के से पार पर। और आज बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण दिन है क्योंकि
ये प्रॉब्लम है ना
अद्वैता जी, ये बड़ा एक सीरियस मुद्दा है। हंसी मजाक का समय तो है नहीं।
जी राजीव जी, एक बार जरा अब ये जाता है तो हंसी मजाक शुरू ही हो जाती है जी।
वो हेड गियर शुरू अपना जरा एडजस्ट कर लें।
बिना हेड गियर के आ गए, पता नहीं अच्छा आप पहन लिया।
यस ये देश में एक प्रधानमंत्री हुए थे जो जून के महीने में भी उनकी टोपी पहनते थे। दूसरे अभी अभिजीत है,
as well as Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, who is in another hat today. I think he's bringing hat fashion to my discussions. I guess I should be grateful, I'm not sure. But I'm sure in the chat I'll know exactly what everyone's thinking of this.
We've been snooped more. I would say even Suhel has been snooped more than all the people who were accusing the government of snooping on Pegasus. Am I right, Suhel?
Yeah.
And of course, Sunday Club regulars, Suhel, Seth and Abhijit, and of course, Shehzad's becoming a regular as well. So,
Afghanistan by force, and the American well, as you can see, that there is going to be some impact on us as well, as you can clearly tell by our guests.
Thank you. That was so
Happy
sweet.
birthday again.
Many happy returns.
Acha,
So-
Jai Shri Ram. I'll take your leave. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram
Ram
to you
Lalla ki
too.
Shri.
Have a
Ram Lalla ki Shri. Jai Shri Ram. Jai Bharat.
Now let's get back to the discussion, producer.
Just what is ISI Chief Hamid doing in Kabul? If we were to go by some reports, the ISI or Pakistan, same difference, have sent in their list of ministers in the Taliban. Let's see if that's true or not today on the Sunday Club. By the way, an Afghan lady who I spoke with was completely appalled at the thought that the ISI was determining who would get cabinet berths in her country, and also remarked that Pakistan's foreign minister seems to be speaking like the foreign minister of Afghanistan. So, is Afghanistan Pakistan's colonial outpost? Let's find out on today's Sunday Club.
Abhijit, what do you think?
Pakistan thought that Afghanistan is going to be its colonial outpost. But remember, in the last 20 years, the Taliban have gotten to know, and I don't use this in the biblical sense of the word as Esther got to know the king, though you could, they've gotten to know Pakistan and the ISI. Remember, Mullah Baradar spent 8 years in jail, in a nasty Pakistani jail for trying to cut a deal. Many of the leaders were handed over to the Americans by the Pakistanis, right? So these people know Pakistan. So if Pakistan think that these people are going to be their proxies, they are not. They have learned how to screw over the ISI, and they are going to play that game to the hilt now. There is a reason that the ISI chief is in Afghanistan, because clearly his desires aren't being met. If these people were Pakistani puppets, one call from Islamabad should have done it. They didn't need the ISI chief to go down. Remember, in this week alone, close to something like between 30 to 40 Pakistani soldiers have been killed by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan.
Yeah.
30 to 40. That is the highest number of Pakistani soldiers killed by the TTP in a very, very long time. So these are all the chickens coming home to roost. And, Pakistan can have its little sense of coziness and all those uneasy smiles by the ISI chief. Alas, he's going to wait and watch. This is going to get better and better for us and not so good for Pakistan.
It's actually frightening. I mean, they're certainly not, the ISI is certainly not risk averse, Professor. I mean, you're dancing with the devil, so to speak, in this sense, and there are going to be repercussions.
Lest I forget later on, what strikes me is the enormous hubris of Pakistan. What we are witnessing today is possibly the most disgraceful, the culmination of a series of acts of treachery, acts of double-facedness, and that has culminated in Kabul. And here is the hubris of Pakistan. They sent in their ISI chief, who walks in out there, not as some people have suggested as a victorious general, but as one who says, oh, all in a day's work, etc. Now, the thing is, have they come out here with a list to dictate what the government will be? I think the Pakistanis are realistic. They know the limits of their influence. But the fact also is, if the Taliban cannot find out for themselves, cannot decide for themselves what their leadership will be, then this increases the leeway that the Pakistanis have, the ISI has, to basically tell them what they should do. And one suspects they're doing this not just alone. They are doing this in conjunction with the Iranians, with the Chinese, with the Russians, and so on and so forth. So if they've come in with a set of instructions, set of advice, whatever, telling the Taliban what to do. But they are not alone in this. I mean, let us look at the recent newscast where the British Broadcasting Corporation was interviewing Christine Fair, talking about Pakistani attempts to stabilize the situation. And when she said, look, the person you think who's a firefighter is actually the arsonist. And within no time at all, BBC absolutely tries to cut her off, saying, look, we have nobody from the Pakistani side to basically counter you, and therefore, we can't have this kind of conversation. What on earth is this? You have the international media, and I'm not surprised it's a BBC, because to a great extent, the BBC has this practice to do malicious monkey balancing. And out here, of course, their proclivity to grant a modicum of legitimacy to the Taliban, that's the part of that particular strategy that already started. So this is what is going on. Internationally, we are now being told that this takeover is okay, there's nothing we can do about it. If we want peace, then this is what we should do. So any claims that the Taliban makes vis-a-vis Panjshiri has to be, given due credit. And the Pakistanis, in a sense, are trying to impart stability. They are basically, this is what their spin is on an act of enormous hubris by the Pakistanis. And it simply amazes me. How will it play out? I think, I agree with Abhijit, it will play out disastrously. Even if it does not play out disastrously in the next few days, as I've always mentioned, there'll be so many incidents, and these things are incident driven. There'll be so many flashpoints that somebody or the other will do something stupid, and the thing will start to unravel faster than you think it will.
Abhijit, what about these indications that are being made about Kashmir? And also we had Mehbooba Mufti, which I mentioned on our last Sunday Club, saying that, we're running out of patience, etc., something to that effect. And what do you make of this? And then on the other hand, the Taliban has also said that our country will not be used as, a haven for terrorists and people who want to carry out attacks in other countries.
Look, the Taliban is different, but it's also not different. Do they probably want to help out all their compatriots and fellow international jihadis, etc., etc., etc.? Of course, they do. The question is, will they, after what happened the last time? Clearly not. Will they depend on a fickle, fidgety ally like Pakistan who can't be trusted? Of course not. So look, it's purely a case of maturing with age. They've probably, unlike Rahul Gandhi, who never seems to learn from his mistakes, I won't say the Taliban don't learn from their mistakes. If you remember, after the US invasion, till around 2003, 2004, till about 2004, they completely went underground. There were no attacks and things like that. It was only in 2004 that they started regrouping and attacking and things like that. And they learned their lesson. When the NATO allies came up with their so-called ink blot strategy, that you get into one place and then slowly expand your footprint, they countered it very, very strategically. So they clearly learned. You're right. Some of it was Pakistan, some of it was they themselves. So there is also a limit to what Pakistan can do, because remember, in many ways, what Mullah Baradar has pulled off, he pulled the wool over Pakistani eyes. The Pakistani expected this capture of Afghanistan to take something like between 6 months to 3-4 years. That did not happen. Why? Because Baradar, like what he got put in jail for in 2010, he cut a deal with Ghani and co. Right. Now, what was the Pakistani game plan throughout? It was to see to it that the Taliban die in large numbers the way Hezbollah are dying in Syria, Then Pakistan will send the frontier corps or whatever dressed up as Taliban to take over soft capture of the Taliban. And then when the Taliban takes over Afghanistan, it will be a soft capture of Afghanistan. Now that hasn't happened. If you look at all the statements that have been coming out, I think Zabiullah said, that not Zabiullah, Akhundzada, who's going to be the supreme leader or whatever, said that, if a true Afghan can never accept the Durand line. There have been lots of statements hostile to Pakistan that have been coming out from the Taliban. So let's wait and watch. It's too early. There is a lot of tension even between the Haqqani faction and the Quetta Shura. We know of about 6 different kind of factions. I'm a bit hesitant to say factions, but let's say 6 different splinters, all of which are vying for power. If Pakistan controlled the game, why would ISIS, which the Pakistanis have made contact with, know them quite well, why would they carry out the bombing of Kabul airfield? See, none of these pieces are adding up. What Pakistan has used ISIS in the past for has been as a balancer. So if the Quetta Shura's power goes down relatively, ISIS will carry out an attack on behalf of the Quetta Shura to equalize with the Haqqani network. So these kind of power games keep happening. What you'd probably end up seeing is Pakistan wants a manageable chaos in Afghanistan, but chaos in Afghanistan is never manageable. So what they're going to get is pre-Taliban style Mujahideen chaos, which the Pakistanis can't really manage. Let's see how these different factions play out. Between Haqqani, Baradar and Co., let's see how these things play out. And ISIS is the big unknown in the game because we still don't know for sure who the leadership is, what they are linked to. We know they're linked to the ISI, but we don't even know what exact support the ISI provides, how it will be used. Let's see. I'm quite optimistic.
What about the Al-Qaeda, Abhijit? You had, I think it was Osama bin Laden's bodyguard arrive in Kabul and be greeted by the Taliban.
Sorry, you broke up. Could you ask again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, what about the Al-Qaeda? You had reports saying that Osama bin Laden's bodyguard turned up in Kabul and was greeted by the Taliban.
Right. Now, look, there are factions of international fighters. ISIS is one. Al-Qaeda is much reduced, but I won't discount them. Now, these are the people we need to be worried about who will get shifted over to a Kashmir jihad if the situation stabilizes in Afghanistan. So our interests right now are to see to it that the situation does not stabilize in Afghanistan. It acts as a hammer on the anvil, because no matter how much a hammer hammers down in the anvil is going nowhere, the hammer is going nowhere. So you need that perpetual strategy in Afghanistan that if it isn't a pro-India peace and stability, it needs to be perpetual instability. Right? And in that, this is why I have huge issues with us removing our diplomats and things, because they should have been there playing the divide and rule game, starting all the manipulation and things like that. That's very, very important. We need to get there now. You don't have to recognize. We just go in saying we don't recognize the government. We're just there to restart all our development projects, which were there to help the Afghan people. Go around doing it. Get some security guarantees from the local Afghans that you're going to provide us with 20 truckfuls of Taliban men to guard our diplomats and things like that, and go ahead doing it. It's guaranteed. If you want to drive a wedge between Taliban and Pakistan, you have to put the lives of your diplomats on the line. Remember, your services, your IAS, IFS, IPS, army, they have to put their lives on the line for the country. That's what they're there for, whether you like it or not. It's a horrible thing to say, but that's the reality of it. Right? They need to go back there. They are our first line of mischief in Afghanistan.
Professor, what about the Chinese who are, after that big red carpet welcome to the Taliban before the fall of Kabul, have been sort of reticent, which is typical Chinese, but what do you think their game plan is?
Look, the Chinese are not going to come up directly. That's clear. They won't be as foolish as either the Russians were 40 years ago, or the Americans were some years ago, to put themselves directly in harm's way. They will operate through other means. I mean, they have somebody to do their dirty work for them, that's Pakistan. And where financial dealings are concerned, the big tickets item are concerned, they don't have to send in hosts of people. That requires investment, and the Chinese will be very clever. They will invest in those places where they're sure they can get the money out. So the Chinese will be reticent about coming upfront in huge numbers. They will do so in a manner so that blowback to Chinese does not occur, either financially or through the damage to their men and to Chinese staff. So in a sense, they are pretty happy to take the Pakistanis take the limelight. I don't expect. And if things go south, then Pakistan can handle it. The Chinese will say, no, we had nothing to do with it anyway. But let me come back to a point with Abhijit basically talked about. Our forces, our services have to put their lives on line if you want to create mischief. I think if mischief is to be created, mischief can be created without actually being present in Afghanistan. As has been said, there are several fault lines in this particular setup. So far, because all the disparate groups that are pushing the Taliban together are right now united. I mean, at this point in time, the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, the Pakistanis are on the same page. When they're on the same page, I think any attempt to create mischief will probably not give you the kind of dividends that you are basically expecting. But later on, wait for somebody to do something stupid. And then when these four countries that have come together are no longer on the same page, that is the time that you step in and do what you have to do. But to do that, I don't think we either need boots on the ground or we need persons on the ground. I think that can be done even without boots or persons being on the ground. That can be done in the back alleys of the capitals of the world or border towns of certain countries. You don't have to be within Pakistan itself. So that's my take, actually.
And just a quick check, I know that Denmark has refused to recognize the Taliban. Where do you think the other countries are going to fall where this is concerned? What about the UK, the USA, Australia, the democracies? I'm speaking primarily about the democracies. Abhijit, do you want to take a shot at this? I think Abhijit's having some audio issues. He's unable to hear me. Professor, can you hear me?
Sorry, can you? Yeah, I can.
Yeah, Abhijit, I'm saying Denmark has refused to recognize the Taliban government, and I just wanted to know how do you think the democracies are going to react? I'm talking about the US, UK, Australia, and India as well. What do you think is going to happen if you were to venture a guess at this point?
Look, ultimately, everybody's going to recognize the Taliban one way or another. Either officially or unofficially, they will have to, because all their primary interests are in preventing an attack from happening. Now, you can't prevent an attack from happening if you refuse to talk to somebody. That's the main game out here. The second thing here is, remember, they also went into sort of spread democracy. It failed, and now the Taliban is back. So they can't go around now claiming that, their own withdrawal statement was, we didn't go in there for nation building. We went in there to ensure that, the Taliban was defeated. The Afghan people didn't want it. So now they've got what they want. So when you say now, you reverse 20 years of policy and say we went there for nation building, you can't make up democracy then as the criteria for recognizing that nation. So it's as simple as that. You recognize China doesn't have a democracy. You recognize Vietnam doesn't have a democracy. There's so many countries without a democracy that America recognizes, that the whole world recognizes, which has never been an issue. I don't think it's going to be an issue. There's going to be a slow movement. China has recognized, Pakistan has recognized, Russia. it'll be the third country to recognize. It's only a matter of time before the Americans go back. And India, of course, knowing the way our bureaucracy works, will only go in when everybody else has gone in and the strategic advantage is lost.
Professor, do you want to also
Yeah.
say something about this? Yeah.
Right now, if you look at the criteria that is being laid out by a lot of people, is that they want a representative, inclusive government in Afghanistan. That means you have to basically pack everybody in. Now, exactly what that means, I'm not too sure. What do you mean by representative? The question is, do I have different shades of the Taliban? Then, so I have to have an Uzbek Taliban, the Tajik Taliban, the Pashtun Taliban, the Gujar Taliban, etc., the Nuristani Taliban, or the other faction, other factions in Taliban, for example, the Panjshiri resistance, the remnants of the Northern Alliance, the Uzbeks as represented by Dostam, are they to be included? Look, right now, the United States, in a sense, is regaining its breath. They are, you could say, licking their boots, or basically they are watching. They're trying to recalibrate their strategies. So is India. Now, there was an article, I think, yesterday or day before, or today, that India and the United States have basically agreed that if Afghanistan is to fall to the Indo-China, the Pakistan-China axis, as long as it is stable and does not promote terrorism, we can live with it. Okay. But I think that was an article that was, flying a kite to get a response from somebody, etc. I think right now, most democracies, most Western powers have not figured out a way or figured out the criterion for which they will use to recognize the regime. My thing is, let us watch and wait, because if the Taliban regime is minded to do us harm, it will do us harm whether we recognize it or not. It will do us more harm if it perceives that we are effectively helping the Northern Alliance. If it is not minded to do us harm, then waiting for the others to do and then follow them, I think is also a strategy. So my thing is, let the Taliban itself stabilize. Right now, they themselves have not stabilized. They have not been able to form the government yet. So it is early days yet to recognize something which has not yet been formed. Let them form the government first. Let us see whether this government will last, or like the 1992 Afghan rebel government that took over, started, slaughtering each other and fell each other's throats. Let us wait for it. 4, 5, 6 months, not a problem. Let's wait. It's best when it comes to Afghanistan not to jump the gun, because those who have paid a very heavy price for it, and we are seeing that right now.
But why can't the governments or the democracies of the world come together and say that we will recognize your government if you ensure, for example, the rights of women, for education, for working, and all of those things? I mean, why can there not be this kind of negotiation and conversation at this stage, like there was with earlier, when all those meetings in Doha and things like that? Why can women not be made stakeholders in this recognition? Abhijit.
Sorry, okay.
Oh, please, Professor, you can. I think Abhijit's having some
Look,
trouble with
this rights of women thing, I mean, in principle, no problem. But the question is, for example, does Saudi Arabia respect the rights of women? Under MBS, it may be marginally better. But that was never a criterion for democracies to do business with Saudi Arabia and a host of regimes which either disrespected or treated women as second-class citizens, or treated religious minorities or ethnic minorities as second-class citizens. So all this talk about this being a criteria for dealing with Afghanistan, I think is premature. I think we have to wait and watch. My sense is that a lot of democracies basically have made the sounds that unless the Taliban brings in a more inclusive government, we don't know what that means. Recognition or doing business with them, being more important than recognition, will be difficult. I think that is right now where we are.
Yeah. Abhijit, you wanted to say something as well?
Look, this entire thing about women's rights, human rights, democracy, they've always been a canard. For the West, they've always been a canard. then there are gullible people like India who actually believe this kind of crap. Okay. The West was never interested in any of these. Remember, if it was women's rights that they were interested in, Libya was way ahead of most Arab allies. Libya, Iraq, the Syrian government were way ahead in women's rights, or even having sham elections than the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, or the Emiratis ever have been. When have you had elections in all these US allies? Never. At least these countries had some kind of sham elections. These countries definitely made a big issue out of giving women's, because that was the Baathist secular, well, as secular as a Muslim country can get. Ideology was all about women's rights and things like that. That didn't prevent regime change operations from going ahead out there, right? So we need to be very clear about this. These were all post facto window dressing justifications, putting lipstick on a pig. The pig was always in the room. It was very clear. It was the same smelly, stinky pig, which was security concerns. And, you can dress up a pig. You can put a tutu on it like Disney's Fantasia and put necklaces on a hippo and make it dance ballet. But it doesn't make it real. A cartoon is a cartoon is a cartoon. So, essentially what the West did was it condomized the people of Afghanistan. It condomized the women of Afghanistan. There isn't a single issue that has been posited or portrayed in public as the main reason for nation building that was ever serious for them. Because remember, what money they put into all these issues was money that went back to their own NGOs through all these contracts for gender studies program, gender sensitization program, DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusivity, Codswallop. Imagine going to an Afghan village that is illiterate, where the men will, shoot women at the drop of a bullet, saying, you need to have black Taliban amongst you. You need to have LGBTQ Taliban amongst you, and you need to be trans-sensitive and know the correct pronouns to address certain people. Just because Mullah Brother has a beard, you can't assume his pronouns are he, him. This is what they were doing. So it was a big, big scam. You look at the kind of shit they were running out of the Afghan national universities. They were just another front for all these bloody bizarro, weirdo NGOs to come there and make money. That was it. Nothing more. I think you look at the entire structure the Americans set up there was corruption, more corruption on the basis. I mean, you look even the West, when we're talking about all this DEI training, critical race theory and all of that, who are the biggest supporters of this? California tech-based companies, okay? Or, excuse me, New York-based media companies. Why is that? Because in an age where there is so much disruption, I think all of us were born when nobody knew Nokia, but Nokia became a big company within our time, within our memory span. And it also collapsed and died within our memory span. That is the kind of rapidity of technology you're seeing. So what these electronics companies, these tech companies are doing is they're using this as a social terror mechanism, much the same way as the Spanish Inquisition, the Portuguese Inquisition, and all of that were used, or the German witch hunts were used, to suppress social dissent, divert it elsewhere, to keep all employees and new companies in a perpetual state of flux and fear, not knowing what's going to happen, to prevent the kind of disruption that would knock them off their perches like Nokia got knocked off its perch. It's that simple. And that is the whole reason all this Codswallop was introduced into Afghanistan as well, to act as a sort of money siphoning. Well, it wasn't intentionally a money siphoning device, but it ultimately became a money siphoning device. You look at Hamid Karzai and Ghani, they're two of the most corrupt people you will ever meet in your entire life. This is a fellow, when he was leaving Afghanistan, he took about $160 million worth of cash with him in his convoy. Instead of taking Afghans, he was taking US dollars with him. His nephew, that Sultan Ghani, was posting pictures of him on the on Instagram, posing in front of an $85 million Gulfstream private jet, saying, moving from one crisis to other. He's modeling when Kabul is falling. He's sitting at Kabul airport in front of his Gulfstream and modeling. This is the kind of trash that these people were up to. Right? So let's take away this entire democracy means squat to the Americans. Okay, women's rights means squat to the Americans. If this were a pro-America government, they would go out of their way to justify stoning women and shooting women as, cultural diversity. We should not be judging. We should be culturally relativistic, and all kinds of crap like that.
A reason for everything when it suits their agenda is essentially what you're saying. But hopefully, other countries also, I think, need to start exerting themselves in a way that they aren't in the present time. And I really want to ask both of you this. I mean, post this, is America still a superpower?
I think it is. I think it is. I mean, in the same way the Soviet Union is, because it has enough nukes to wipe, to finish the rest of the world. But what America is losing, it seems to me, is coherence. The Chinese have a lot of coherence. A lot of things where the Chinese are concerned, economics, policy, etc., aligned. Now, one must be careful. I remember in the 80s, we talked about the rising Japanese superpower. In the 70s, we talked about the rising Soviets. And within a decade or so, the Soviets were on the map. And in the 90s, 2000s, the Japanese were on the map. So there are several structural problems within the Chinese economy, society, etc. Don't be surprised if they're on the mat 10 years hence. But as of now, what they seem to have is coherence, policy coherence, which seems to stretch across sectors. The United States does not have that particular coherence, and right now the Afghanistan imbroglio, the farce that you saw in Afghanistan demonstrates they have lost the will to, do something substantial. If you want to be a superpower, then you have to do certain, if not be the policeman of the world, you have to do that much extra to ensure that you stand by certain global institutions. Now, the fact is, will America stand by or protect certain global institutions? As of now, it seems it can't do it alone. It needs the help of certain people. But even for that, I think such is the level of trust where America is concerned right now, that other democracies, and this includes for the first time the United Kingdom, are not willing to trust America as things stand today. So a partnership of democracies, which, for example, would like to see certain global institutions stand work, that partnership cannot come into fruition because America right now is in a sorry mess. And until we get signals from America, and let us face it, when Biden speaks, the signals that he gives to others is very run. That is something alarming. Just imagine, I would have never thought it possible. Tony Blair describing the American action in Afghanistan as imbecilic. Somebody who stood by George Bush through that entire Iraq affair now says that is imbecilic. And I have no doubt that Boris Johnson also thinks that what the Americans did in the United Kingdom is also imbecilic. And when I saw the reactions of the American spokesperson, the lady, she had to say, look, we are concentrating on the current Prime Minister of the UK and not past Prime Ministers of the UK. That statement itself reveals a lot about what the United States thinks about itself now. And right now, American self-esteem is very, very low. With low self-esteem, very difficult to be a superpower.
Very well summed up. And now just moving, Abhijit, you wanted to say something before we move on to the last topic for the day, which you'll discuss quickly and briefly.
Yep.
Go ahead, Abhijit.
I'll have to leave at 8:30, so I'll wrap up here.
Sure.
See, what we're seeing is a double decline. We've seen the same kind of double decline before in history, in the Bronze Age between the Hittites and the Egyptians, in late antiquity between the Byzantines and the Persians, where a third power comes and disrupts everything. So in the Bronze Age collapse, it was the sea people coming and disrupting everything. In the case of the late antiquity collapse, it was the Arabs coming and destroying both the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. We're seeing that today because America is now, it is a superpower. It will remain a superpower. China will also remain a superpower for another 30, 40 years minimum. The question is, what caliber of superpower will they be? And what you're seeing today is, do you remember when America withdrew from Saigon? It took them at least 15 years before they mustered the courage to go in to do another one of these operations, which was Iraq. Right? So it's a collapse of self-confidence, number one. And number two, what we're seeing is that the American economy is turning on itself. It is going into this fear psychosis, these paroxysms of internal revolution or whatever. There is a dar ka mahal, quote unquote, in America. Now remember, innovation can't happen in a dar ka mahal. The whole point of why did the Industrial Revolution happen, the precursor to the Industrial Revolution, was the state's absolute monopoly on violence. Okay, the rule of law. Today, there is no monopoly of violence in America. Today, there is no rule of law in America because you basically have lynch mobs, either online lynch mobs or real lynch mobs, that will come after you for anything you say or do. So that innovation is going to collapse. It's moving now from the East Coast and the West Coast to the South, to Texas and places like that. The problem is the people moving are bringing that same mentality to these states, and they're going to end up bringing the same kind of toxic ideologies like BLM and CRT out there, which is ultimately going to lead to the collapse of America. It is not going to be a quick collapse. So it is going to be a slow decline. But for the next 30, 40 years, I'm not seeing American predominance go away anywhere. With China, it's a slightly different thing. Like the professor said, yes, they do have a more coherent policy. The problem is when you centralize and micromanage policy right from the top, the feedback mechanisms, the early warning mechanisms, they tend to fail. And they tend to magnify mistakes quite considerably. So, for example, if you look at the economic plans, we haven't seen a cost-benefit analysis. We haven't seen opportunity costing, which is why most of these economic plans are kind of white elephants in the same thing, in the same mold of Brezhnev and people like that, who ultimately laid the foundations for the collapse of the Soviet Union. Is it going to collapse the way the Soviet Union did? No, it will be different kinds of things. But you're basically seeing both have peaked and both are going down. It'll be fun to watch who goes down first and what comes up as a replacement.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for that, and we must discuss the woke culture that is also prevalent in America, which is really seeding this kind of decline.
Not culture, the woke disease. The woke disease.
The woke disease. Thank you, Abhijit. I know you've got to run along for some glamorous plans, I'm sure, this evening. But I'm going to hold on to the professor. Go ahead, tell us.
And thank you all for your birthday wishes. So kind. We saw all the birthday wishes come up from our viewers. Thank you so much. Ta-ta.
What are your plans?
Oh, I'm on another podcast now.
Oh, dear. Let you go then.
Because I budgeted for 7 o'clock, right? 7 to 8:30. But today it became 7:30. Yeah, so, yeah. Ciao.
Budgeted, if you please. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
But hold on to the professor very quickly, and you're perfect for this anyway because you're sitting in Jammu. You're an expert on Jammu and Kashmir. So let's get to it. Producer, please roll the last.
Separatist Kashmiri leader and Pakistani supporter Syed Geelani died earlier this week in Srinagar. With his passing, a long era in the Kashmiri separatist movement comes to an end. What does this mean for local Kashmiri politics? We shall discuss today on the Sunday Club.
Professor, what is your take on this? I mean, this is a man that was in his 90s, felt like he'd been around forever. What's happening? What's going on with the morale, with the politics, all of those things?
Look, till 87 or till 1990, the influence that this gentleman had was fairly limited. I mean, the Jamaat-e-Islami as a political force, when it was in electoral politics, was never able to do much. When it comes to tall leaders of the state, Sheikh Abdullah, etc., he is not a patch on Sheikh Abdullah. A lot of people will tell you, after Sheikh, this is the guy with mass, appeal, etc. The thing is the following. After insurgency and separatism got hold of this particular state, 1990 onwards, and those feelings retained, insofar as he spoke about those feelings, his voice found amplification. His voice found amplification. So people said, he can basically stop, Kashmir with one statement, etc. But that also depended from time to time. I remember when the Congress PDP came to power in 2002, till the Amarnath Yatra, and that agitation over the Amarnath Yatra, which was basically fueled. He started the noises, but it was the PDP which egged it along and caused the collapse of the government. In those 6 years, as normalcy returned to Kashmir, his statements about boycotting elections, by-elections, etc., nobody listened to. In 2014, he called for elections to be boycotted. Nobody listened to it. We had record polling in the 2015 assembly elections. So the thing is, separatist sentiment, ground, alienation at the ground level, etc., which did not have to do with him. But since he basically spoke on these things, and he found amplification on the ground, people thought he was very, very powerful. His power was also amplified by certain policies undertaken by certain political parties. For example, the PDP. The PDP tried to counterbalance the National Conference, by playing up the Jamaat. So it, in a sense, give him respect, give his followers influence, put them in government jobs, police, etc., and they will hopefully tell their cadre and others to vote for the PDP. So it added to PDP's vote bank. So under those circumstances, where certain mainstream political parties are actually giving him relevance, are basically giving him oxygen, he would have some influence. And that influence, people told us, was evidence that his, he rivaled Sheikh Abdullah. Completely false, completely false. And now when he has expired, once, of course, after 2019, 5th August, once the central government took control of this particular region, the transformation of a state to union territory was basically to effect branch and root transformation, and importantly, to take control of law and order. He has expired. Internet services, contrary to popular belief, at least where BSNL concerned, was not snapped. They were there. And what happened? Things have passed off normally. So all this, he was built up from time to time to being a great thing. And what people forget was the following. Yeah.
Professor, didn't the left liberal mainstream media in India, which is basically most of the media, didn't they also build him up? Because I saw when there were obituaries and very kind of sad obituaries about his passing and things like that. So
of course they did. Of course they did. But if truth be told, it was also the policy of the government of India, in a sense to, try to buy him off. So you keep quiet for some time, we'll basically accommodate your relatives here and there and everywhere. So he would make noises from time to time, but not with the heart, with, so as to really disturb things. So in a sense, when the government of India tried to mainstream him, I hardly blame the liberal media from basically doing the same. What they did not ask the government was difficult questions. That if he is really, if he is really to be mainstream, what is he doing? Are his actions inimical to the society of Jammu and Kashmir? Inimical to the interests of the government India? These are the questions that the media never asked, because the media was also complicit in the state's attempt to buy this character out. And such characters, basically, like the Mongol hordes, will come back in different form to keep on milking the government for more and more largesse. And so what happened was, it was he who shifted the goalposts. He kept on taking money from the government, kept on basically, whenever he found the opportunity, some incidents like the Burhan Wani incident or some incident like the Tufail Mattu incident, and then he would be at it again. Not because he had the power, but because he had found the emotive issue, which if anybody had taken it up, would have riled the people in the valley. So this is what he continuously did. All this came to an end in 2019, and when he was put under house arrest, and when he expires, the so-called tallest leader is buried quietly in the dead of the morning, in the wee hours of the morning, and nothing happens in Jammu and Kashmir. That basically tells you the extent of his real influence. And let us face this, the attempts to basically revive him had a long history. After Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had been executed, the National Conference really went out against the Jamaatis, really went out. They would have been marginalized then and there, but it was the Congress. Mufti Muhammad Saeed persuaded Mrs. Gandhi to put pressure on the National Conference to ensure that the Jamaat, they basically let the heat off the Jamaat. So he basically came back, he revived. It's the policies of the government of India, internecine Congress policies aimed at sometimes undercutting the National Conference, which kept on giving him oxygen from time to time when his career should have been over. He won in 77, he lost in 1983. If he was so popular, and if he was basically so popular in Sopore, which is considered to be, the hotbed of terrorism, how come he lost in 1983? So the fact is, his popularity was always overstated. And remember, if the separatists really were confident, then they would have done what the Sinn Féin did after the First World War. They would have contested the elections, won a majority in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, and then refused to take up their seats. So you win the elections, you have support, and you don't take up your seats to show that the legitimacy of the election has been undermined. They never did that because they never had the support of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, at least to the extent where they could capture a majority of the seats. That is why,
Professor,
that
also
is why he never contested.
Imran Khan has declared 2nd September, or whichever the date was, as some sort of day in remembrance of him, etc., etc. So what is Pakistan's take now? Because, somebody who was avowedly and openly singing their tune is no longer around.
Okay. Look, my thing is the following. He was, after all, a more loyal Pakistani, more loyal than the Pakistanis themselves. So to that extent, it is a loss. Now, the fact is, even before he had expired, for the last 2 years, the situation on the ground is so much controlled by the security forces. People act on information, etc., that his ability to do anything was anyway compromised. This is something that is of a, okay, you've done so much for us, you have killed so many people for us, you've soaked the valley in blood, so the least we can do is basically do a half-mast for you. So it also tells the loyalists in Pakistan, in Jammu and Kashmir, the Pakistani loyalists in Jammu and Kashmir, the constituency, look, we've done something for you. This is a token they had to do to maintain or at least show a fig leaf of concern where their constituency in the valley is concerned. But having been here for 15 years, I have known whenever the government of the day wanted to control the security situation on the ground, the Jammu Kashmir police by itself, given its intelligence, given its brave police officers, can do it very easily. There is no problem at all. When Tufail Mattu died, there was so much problems, and yet After Umar Abdullah got his act together, shifted around certain policemen, put sound people in charge. From 2011 to 2016 till Burhan Wani died, you had absolute peace. Even when that fellow Guru was executed, there was one or two days curfew, but you had peace. Tourists came to the valley in record numbers. Where was Geelani? He was there. No matter what he said, no matter what he did, nothing happened. He called for a boycott of the elections, the Panchayati Raj elections in 2011. There was 80% polling. So when the government of the day decides to control violence on the ground, it is controlled. What happened after 2016 was the following. You had the PDP and their chief ministers who were in charge of home, law and order, etc. And they shifted around, wholesale transferred of police officers who had maintained the peace. Because the PDP per se was not interested in peace. They were interested in ensuring that there's some trouble goes on and they're able to blackmail the central government. Of course, they didn't figure out soon enough that the two gentlemen right now who can run the country, the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, do not take very kindly to blackmail. And therefore, the form of Article 370 that they had, which they used to foment so much trouble in the state, that was amended. The constitution of the country was extended to Jammu and Kashmir, and the state was divided into two union territories. And in a sense, a branch of true transformation is being effected in Jammu and Kashmir.
Right, and a lot of the commentary that came, especially from the Kashmiri Pandit community after he died, was of course to blame him for the exodus, for the killings in the community, and also to state that whilst he sent young men out to fight, his own family members, his own loved ones were safe and secure and had jobs and were settled abroad and in other parts of the world and the country. So there you have it.
To be fair to Syed Geelani, it is not only he who basically sent the others to battle while he kept his family at home. It is true of all separatist leaders. You know, I keep on telling a lot of my friends in the valley that there's a special place in hell for people who goad impressionable youth to put themselves in harm's way while they enjoy the comforts of home. This is so true for the separatist leaders. It is so true for the supposed intellectuals of the valley who talk about the movement, etc., and the sacrifices of the youth. Which youth? Not their friends and relatives, not their sons, not their brothers. It is basically the youths of those who are gullible enough to basically follow them, to follow the dictates of Ali Shah Geelani, foolishly embark on a cause on which they know nothing about. You talk to people and you figure out, nothing about it. And they sacrifice their lives. And from time to time, these sacrifices were stage managed to recruit more people. One of the things that has happened now, that these funerals of militants, of terrorists, are no longer, the state has ensured that they are no longer recruitment grounds.
Right.
They are held in private. People are asked to keep away, much in the manner in which Ali Shah Geelani's funeral was held.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor. Pleasure as always to have you here with us on Sundays and, telling us the insight of a lot of these issues that we see from the outside and that you have studied for many, many years, decades, in fact. Thank you once again. And thank you to all our viewers. You went a little over time. We'll try and be better at time management going forward. But do go ahead and like, share, subscribe, because I always forget to say that. So please do that without me having to remind you. And we'll be back next week. We're also going to be starting new programs. We had a great show yesterday. And I think it's really important if you care about what's happening in Afghanistan, especially with women in Afghanistan. I was in conversation with Ms. Mehbooba Shiraz, who is one of the foremost women's activists in Afghanistan. So do watch that show to get a sense of the desperation, the urgency, and the fact that the lives of women in Afghanistan changed overnight, which is just tragic and so traumatic. As always, my prayers with Afghanistan at this point of time as they go through a very traumatic time in their very troubled history and present. And we shall see you again next Sunday. Thank you and goodbye.